Welcome back to your Pig Trail Show. Will Monclair alongside our Kevin McPherson for your Hog Hoops Report. Kevin, we've got two transfers this week that we got to talk about. One today and one from earlier this week. Which one are you more excited about? Which one do you want to start with?
Well, let's start with the news. Today it's newsworthy. We come on once a week, so the first came off the board on Tuesday. It's been a few days, but one just hit today. Treman Mark, a 6'5" guard wing out of Houston. Look, we know what the Houston Cougars have done. In the last 3 years, this young man is a junior transfer, Final Four as a freshman. He only played 7 games as a sophomore, had an injury and shoulder surgery, but that team went to the Elite Eight. And then this past season, he started every game. That team went to the Sweet 16 and number 1 seed. But he's been part of, if you think about this young man's resume, Treman Mark, 10 points a game. He's a lefty, and he's a slasher getting to the basket. It's not as much about his offense as I think this guy is a plus defender verging on being elite. He's put his name in the NBA draft recently as well, so we got to keep an eye on that. But today he committed to Arkansas, and look, I talk about some of the attributes as a defender. Arkansas has been missing a guy like Adese Toney that they had year before last that helped that team get to an Elite Eight. A transfer who only played 1 season in Arkansas. We've seen what Devo Davis has done as a lockdown defender at times. But Adese Toney and Davis were in tandem 2 years ago. And then 3 years ago, you had guys like Justin Smith, Jalen Tate on the perimeter along with Devo. So Arkansas's had multiple sort of versatile defenders not only in the backcourt, but in that 3-4, that kind of combo spot. And I think this team this season, even though it was still good defensively, it wasn't as good. And I think it was missing, outside of Devo Davis, consistent plus defensive efforts night in and night out. Treman Mark's going to bring that game in and game out. I mentioned what he's been a part of at Houston. They won their conference 2 of the last 3 years, the American Athletic Conference, with him a big part of that. I mentioned the NCAA tournament, the postseason success. That's the kind of resume that Devo Davis brings to the table. 3 years in a row helping Arkansas get to Elite Eights and Sweet 16. So you automatically add a guy like that from Houston. Devo Davis, we know, recently put his name in the draft. He didn't hire an agent he's leaving the door cracked for a return. But I think it's smart for Arkansas not only to get this player, whether you get Devo back or not, but if Devo stays in the draft, you need to know you've got one guy that you can check that box. Lockdown defender, elite defender. CBS Sports on Friday put out its top list of transfer portal prospects. This guy came in at number 5 on that list out of all the portal players that are out there. So, and most of that, again, is on the defense. He's a guy, when we look at him at 10 points a game, he really started to produce and score a lot in the last stretch of games, including the NCAA tournament, 26 points and 9 rebounds. And Houston had to come from behind to beat Auburn in the round of 32 to move on to the Sweet 16. They lost in the Sweet 16 to Miami. We know the Hurricane ended up trekking to the Final Four, but in that loss, he had 14 points, 5 rebounds. So his last 2 games in the NCAA tournament, his last time at Houston, he averaged 20 points a game there and 7 rebounds. So he started to show some of that production outside of just being a defender. We go back to guys like Toney. He was a double-figure scorer, a lot of offensive rebounds, putbacks, but not a shot creator as much as an opportunistic scorer who did other things, rebounded and defended, and then made his free throws when he got to the line. This young man has similar attributes to Adese Toney when you talk about size and some of the things he can do. And this guy's ceiling may even be higher. And I mentioned the lefty thing, talking about Devo being a lefty, Treman Mark is a lefty. We haven't even talked yet, Will, about earlier in the week on Tuesday, Arkansas got its first portal commitment from Keon Benefield Jr. He was a freshman guard at Washington in the Pac-12. They didn't have a great season, but he made the all-freshman team in the Pac-12, double-figure score, 10 points a game, just over 3 assists, about 3 rebounds at 6'1". He's rangy. He's got length. He's very quick with all that length as well. He's a quick burst, quick change of pace, and end-to-end speed and quickness. And so when I think about that commitment, in addition to Mark, you're seeing the guys that are going to have versatility as defenders. We know Eric Melsman loves that in his backcourt. Again, I think Arkansas was missing just a little bit this year defensively in that backcourt relative to the previous 2 seasons, and the analytics showed that. They were still a very good defensive team, just slightly further down than where they were 2 years ago. And I think both of these guys help Arkansas in that way. Arkansas needs to get better as a three-point shooting team. I'm not sure that these guys move that needle much, but Arkansas had some visitors this weekend, a couple of them that would. So we need to talk about those visitors because I think Arkansas is about to land at least 2 more commitments, potentially as soon as the next 24 hours. So we could be going from 2 to 4 pretty quickly. And we really haven't even scratched the surface yet on some of the frontline options they've been looking at. But between Mark and Benefield, Arkansas is off to a great start in what it's done in the portal so far. Surprises no one. This is what Eric Musselman does every year, this time of year. And he's very strategic in what he seeks and what he brings in. And you can see the success that guys have had the predecessors. So let's keep an eye on these guys as they get into the fold. They'll be on campus, and it won't be very long, a couple of months at most. Well, they'll be coming in with the incoming freshman, Bayfall, 5-star, Layden Blocker, another quick guard, fast guard in that backcourt, another 5-star. So between the 2 portal commitments and the 2 committed high school players, Arkansas's got 4 newcomers coming in. We're going to talk about the scholarship numbers in a little bit. But what do you think? Should we get to these visitors that have one of them still on campus today, but they've had 3 through the weekend?
Yeah. Who are we looking at?
Well, first of all, I'm going to start. This is the headliner for me. Is Khalif Battle, 6'5", grad transfer out of Temple. This guy is a scorer. 18 points a game, led the Owls this past season. When you look at his previous, he only played a little more than a handful of games as a junior. Also an injury that ended his season. But when you cobble together his first 7 or 8 games of that season and then playing a full season or almost a full season this year, about 34 or 35 games. This is a volume, nearly 3 makes from 3 per game, 2.9 triples made per game at about a 38% clip. That's highly impressive. That's volume and efficiency. That's what Arkansas has been missing. This guy he's really good as a spot up shooter. He plays well off the ball. And I like his slash game when he's run off the 3-point line. He's got a good dribble drive craft to create shots when he's run off the line. And so he's playing with 2-man game and picking and choosing off of that because he can pull up and knock down that 3. That's a dimension Arkansas really didn't have last year. Outside of some we saw with Nick Smith Jr., who missed most of the season and never quite got into a postseason rhythm when he was rounding into midseason form at the end of it all. But this is a guy that brings that immediately, and he's a grad transfer. He's got experience. Temple's been a respectable team in that AAC, the same conference that Treman Mark just came from. We know that Ricky Council, who's now in the portal, came from that conference at Wichita State. Trey Wade, a starter 2 years ago on the Elite 8 team from Wichita State. Jimmy Witt Jr., Musselman's first recruiting class out of SMU. Arkansas has had success mining talent in that transfer portal from that league. It's probably, it's arguably the best mid-major league out there. But a Khalif Battle, I think we could hear a commitment. I think it could be Arkansas within the next 24 hours. His high school teammate from New Jersey, Jameer Watkins, a 6'7" combo forward who played at Virginia, was a sophomore at Virginia Commonwealth. He was on the visit at the same time. They both took their official visits simultaneously this Thursday and Friday. And so these are guys that played high school together. And I think with Watkins, this could be another situation where it's almost a package deal where they could be 1-2 off the board in short order. But Watkins is a versatile at 6'7". I mentioned Justin Smith earlier. Arkansas, those tweener-sized guys, Jordan Walsh. We're going to talk a little bit about him in a little bit.
Yep.
But he kind of maybe fits the role of a guy. To me, he's kind of like a utility player, Will, when I look at him. He's not, he averaged just under 10 points a game, but he had multiple games, 3 games of 10 or more rebounds, multiple games with 8 or more rebounds, 12, I think. And then he gets deflections. He's very active. He has a high floor IQ and his anticipation defensively. So another guy that can be a defender, not necessarily that shooter that we just talked about in Khalif Battle, but Arkansas did have and does have another shooter scorer on campus, and it's a Butler transfer, Jaden Taylor, another 6'5" guard. He was on campus Saturday and today. His visit may still very well be going on, hasn't wrapped up yet. Another official visitor, almost 13 points a game, but here's another shooter, a guy that can knock it down from 3. And I really like his dribble drive game because he plays at his own pace, He never seems to break his pace or stride, no matter what defenders are throwing at him or what's coming at him. He plays at his pace, and he's a very confident player. And this is another veteran shooter scorer that's been at Butler. We know Butler's in that tough Big East. You know that. You're
Oh
from
yeah.
that part of the country.
Oh yeah.
But those are the three visitors this weekend on top of the two commitments that we've seen this week. And we haven't even gotten into yet about the current Hogs and what's going on and what's the latest there, because there's been some stuff that's come out in the last few days since we were last on.
Yeah, absolutely, Kevin. We want to jump into that. With all of these players coming in and potentially more, what does it mean for people like Makai? What does it mean? We know Mikel's out. We know Pinion's back. We know Graham's back. Ford, Walsh. What are we hearing with players that Arkansas already knows?
Well, that's just it. See, so this is a numbers game. When Mikel Mitchell announced a couple of days ago, I think it was Friday, that he was going to go in the portal, a couple of things stood out. One is Makai didn't make an announcement.
Mm-hmm.
So we can speculate on that. I've been told for a while that this might be the first time since the college era that they are going to play and not play together, that Makai may very well end up remaining a Razorback.
Oh, wow.
What I'm hearing, that's the most likely outcome for Makai, that he's going to stay put. Okay. So we know Treman Brazil recently announced he's coming back. Let's look at this front line. Jalen Graham early in the week, you mentioned that, says he's coming back. That's three not only veteran players, but have been in the system. That's program continuity that Musselman chose not to have last year when he turned the roster over 11 of the 13 scholarship players. It's starting to look a little bit more like his previous 3 seasons, where he's really only flipping maybe half the roster and not nearly all of it. And you look at those front line, if indeed Makai Mitchell's coming back, I don't want to say that I know that to 100%, but I believe that's where that's headed. Now, I said when Mikel went in the portal, it brought up 2 things. It was the fact that his twin didn't also announce, but the other part was that because it's a numbers game, that freed up a scholarship based on the numbers, how we see it on the outside looking in. The coaching staff already has ideas, whether guys have announced what they're doing or not, who's coming and going and what they want. But as far as we see the numbers, when Mikel made that decision and made that announcement, it opened up a scholarship. And what does Arkansas do? They follow that up with a portal commitment, which happened today with Treman Mark. Different positional players, but now Arkansas, what we know or what we've been told, is full again. But there are going to be more guys going into the NBA, into that NBA draft. I really thought, a source told me that Anthony Black, the all SEC freshman guard, was going to make an announcement midweek. That didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's anything to that other than his own timing. I see this as a guy that's going into the NBA draft and staying in, and I don't think he's coming back. Arkansas fans and all of us would love to see, and as a media person, I'd love to cover him again, but I just don't think it's going to happen. And then I think Jordan Walsh is going to make a decision here soon. And I think he's going to test the draft waters, and if he does that it makes it a possibility that he doesn't return. So I think those 2 guys are going to be making announcements at some point that they're going in the draft. With Black, I think it's go in and stay in. With Walsh, I'm not sure if he stays in, but I think he's going to test those waters. And then you mentioned some of the other guys making announcements. I just said Jalen Graham. Joseph Pinion said it. Darian Ford was on horseback today, and something he put out saying he was riding it back to Fayetteville for the next season.
That's a good video.
Barry Gunning put a home icon with a photo of him at Bud Walton Arena at center court. So if Arkansas is going to get back a good number of these guys, it shows continuity in the program, guys that have experience in the system. They know how to do things, whether they have a big playing role or not. And some of these guys are going to get more chances, more than likely, if they're coming back. But at the same time, there's a lot of really good talent in the portal. We haven't even talked about frontline guys, and there may be some options there. And at some point in time, regardless of announcements now in early April, we could see things change and shift. And later on, put it this way, there have been players at other programs that have announced they're coming back and within a week or 2 have put their name in the portal anyway. So I'm not saying that's going to happen in Arkansas. I'm saying keep an eye on it, because there's a treasure trove of talent and experience in that portal. And Musselman's going to keep working that until he thinks he's got it right, which means you could see more player movement, even though we're starting to see more announcements that guys are coming back. I wouldn't hold 100% necessarily. Maybe later we'll say it is, that it's going to work out exactly like we've seen it in the last few days because there's been a lot of info getting out.
Yeah, absolutely, Kevin. So much news. I can only imagine what we're going to be talking about next week. But being that it's that first week of April, oh my gosh, what's the date today? Wow, we're past that. It is nearly NBA playoff time, and it's probably not the worst time to talk Pro Hogs. What are we seeing on that end?
Well, today was the end of the regular season. Bobby Portis played today. They were shorthanded the Bucks at Toronto. They lost 16 points. He only played 18 minutes, but they're going to be the number one overall seed effectively. They've got the best record in the NBA, so they have home court advantage as far as they go. And they're looking to have their second title in the last 3 years. He was a big part of the first title that they had in 50 years 2 years ago. He's up for sixth man of the year. His 38 double doubles rank in he's one of the top 10 in the NBA in double doubles on the season. His 23 double doubles playing off the bench leads the NBA. He's probably in the top 3 for sixth man of the year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he's going to win it. Malcolm Brogdon at Boston is one of the other candidates that might be the front runner for that. Emmanuel Quickly for the New York Knicks is another one. Both guards, but Portis is going to be in that discussion. You've got Isaiah Joe and Jalen Williams that have helped Oklahoma City coming into the season. Nobody thought the Thunder would be anything but bad, and this is a team that has earned the 10 seed. It's a play-in game on Wednesday. They'll play the loser of today's New Orleans Pelicans, Minnesota Timberwolves loser. That'll be the 9 seed. So they'll have a play-in game on Wednesday. They have to win that. And if they win that, then they've got to play the loser of the 7 seed and the 8 seed a couple of days later, maybe the next day or the day later, to earn the 8 seed. That would get them in as the 8 seed in the actual playoffs. The play-in is not like it is in college basketball, where if you make the play-in games, technically you've made the NCAA tournament. But it's not, even though you're not in the normal 64 field until you win, you're still part of the NCAA tournament. In the NBA, these play-in games don't count as part of the regular season. They don't count as the playoffs. You got to get into the playoffs by winning games in it. So anyway, Oklahoma City's got to win 2 games, and the first one would be on the road as the 10 seed. So the first one will be on the road against either New Orleans or Minnesota, and that will be on Wednesday. But they do have one more game today, even though that's been decided, against Memphis. They're hosting Memphis. That game started at 2:30. A lot of these teams that already know that they can improve on their seeding or their situation will rest and either not play or barely play some of their key guys. Jalen Williams has been a regular starter now for the last month or so of the regular season. Isaiah Joe's intermittently starting, but also with the 6-man role. We'll see if those guys even play today, but you can bet they're going to be in the lineup. A big part of what happens Wednesday, win or go home, when they go on the road for that. And then, you've got other pro Hogs that are still in the mix. Patrick Beverly with the Bulls played today. That's his hometown, Chicago. Daniel Gafford and the Wizards are not going to make the playoffs. Gafford was out today for their season finale. But in the previous 2 games, career had 25 points and 10 rebounds. It was his 10th double-double of the season. And then right after that, he had a 24-point game with 8 rebounds. And so here's a guy that offensively in his last 2 games had arguably his best stretch of offensive basketball in his career, which is now 4 seasons. So that's building something going into next season as a Washington Wizard. We'll see how all of it plays out. Moses Moody in Golden State. Moses matching up against Isaiah Joe and Jalen Williams in Golden State. 13-point game the other night. All 3 of those guys scored in double figures in that game. Golden State won it, came back and won, but Moses Moody had a really nice game. A positive box score. I mentioned the 13 points, but he's a guy that, in his second season, he's one of the youngest players still in the NBA, but he's a guy that's helped the Warriors more so in the playoffs as a rookie. I don't think he'll have necessarily as good of a role in these playoffs, but they're going to make the playoffs. And so we'll see if they make it as the 6th seed, or if they lose today in Portland, they might end up in one of those playing games as a 7 or 8. But I think they'll take care of business and get in the actual playoffs, not needing the play-in as a 6.
Yeah, Kevin, it's not March anymore, but that does not mean exciting things aren't happening in sports. We appreciate you coming on, pal. We're going to head to break. More Pig Trail Show after this.